Erriyon Knighton is a world championship medalist and an Olympian. That makes him one of the fastest men in the world. But that's not even telling half the story, because he turned professional at 16, and he'll only be 20 years old when the 2024 Olympics come around. If you thought about that long enough, you realize he didn't just skip college. He also skipped the final 2 years of high school competition to take his shot at the pros. So the fact that he's broken world junior records shouldn't come as a surprise, because when you turn pro, the stakes change along with it. The world of professional sprinting doesn't have any All-Americans. Either you make Team USA and you win, or you fail to win. And in case you didn't notice, there's a lot of failures out there on the track. The truth is that Erriyon Knighton is perhaps the greatest young sprinter we've ever seen, since lightning first struck the track almost 2 decades ago. But it's also true that some of the fastest sprinters in the world right now are also running at the college level. And Erriyon doesn't have to deal with them, because he skipped out on running in college entirely. But what would have happened if he actually ran track in college? Or for that matter, even the last 2 years of high school? He would be entering his sophomore year track season right about now. And I love doing what-if scenarios, because we actually have just about everything we would ever need, thanks to the internet, to figure them out. So here is a breakdown of what we could have witnessed during Erriyon Knighton's freshman year season competing in the NCAA. A season that would have been wilder than you could ever imagine, and likely would have changed the course of his entire career. And remember, you don't have to agree with me. That is what the comment section is for, and I try to read them all. But first things first, the idea that Erriyon Knighton definitely should have skipped college is ridiculous, because today we live in an NIL era where college athletes are actually allowed now to get paid from sponsorships, which for the record is basically all professional track and field is. Getting paid to wear a logo when you go out there and run. Besides, we've already seen this with Sydney McLaughlin already. She went to the Olympics while she was in high school, and then came back to be the Gatorade National Athlete of the Year twice in a row, and then went on to college to break the collegiate record, and of course become an NCAA champion. And after all that, she went on to dominate the pros. But Erriyon Knighton skipped his final 2 years of high school. So what would have happened if he actually ran them? Competing for Hillsborough High School as a junior, he likely would have been the fastest man in the state of Florida, and for that matter, the nation. But that's not by as much as you might think, because in 2021, he ran 9.99 wind assisted. But Jalen Slade, who was also running out of Florida at the time, ran 10.03 seconds, and that was in the same race. His 200s were consistently good enough to be the fastest sprinter in the nation. But once again, it ain't by that much, because he ran 20.11 seconds, and Jalen Slade was right behind him at 20.20. They actually both ran at the Olympic trials that year, in reality. But as a senior, he would put down a season for the record books, running 10.04 seconds, wind legal in the 100, and in the 200, he would run 19.49 seconds. That's not just a high school record, that is a world junior record, and I'm willing to bet he would go down as the boys' national track athlete of the year in both seasons. But this is where things get interesting, because college track and field ain't nothing like high school. There's a whole bunch of fast men out there, and they ain't all from America. And we already know where Erriyon Knighton would have run in college anyway, because he trains at the University of Florida right now with their head coach, Mike Holloway. Coincidentally, he also coaches Grant Holloway, so we can pretty much assume whatever performances he's putting out as a pro right now, he'd also be able to do in a college uniform. It would be the same coach, same environment to train in, but different meets to compete in. But the only problem is, Erriyon Knighton doesn't run indoor track at all. I'm not making this up. He legitimately never ran one race. So I can tell you how fast he would have ran, because the internet gives you everything you need. You just gotta do a little bit of math. But I'm sure you really don't care about that. So I'm gonna ask you to just take my word on it. During his first indoor season ever as a freshman, he'd likely run no faster than 6:58 in the 60-meter dash. To put that in perspective, that's faster than Noah Lyles was at that time in his career. And his best indoor 200 would probably be about 20.14 seconds. So wearing a Florida Gators uniform, he'd show up to the SEC championships, running both events. He'd get third in the 60-meter dash, behind Favor Ashe of Auburn, and another talented freshman, Jordan Anthony of Kentucky, but he since transferred to Texas A&M. But he'd win the SEC 200, and it honestly wouldn't be that close, giving Florida a 1-2 punch between Erriyon Knighton and Ja'Cory Patterson, with Matthew Bowling of Georgia coming in third. The Florida Gators got second in that meet, in reality, but the points that Erriyon Knighton gave them would likely make it a whole lot closer, but they'd still end up in second anyway, losing to Arkansas. But at the NCAA indoor meet, he'd likely have a chance to sneak into the 60-meter dash final, but it isn't a foregone conclusion. Let's assume that he did. In that race, he would still finish no higher than 5th overall, behind Terrence Jones of Texas Tech and Jordan Anthony, once again, of Kentucky. And his NCAA championship 200 would be a lot closer than you would think. In fact, he'd likely get edged out at the line by Matthew Bowling, who put down 20.12 seconds in the final. That means he would lose by 0.02 of a second. But even still, those points would push Florida ahead of Georgia on the leaderboard, so they would finish in second, losing again to the Arkansas Razorbacks. So heading outdoors, of course there would be high hopes for him. He's the only freshman to go All-American in both his indoor sprint events, and he would back that up in the 100-meter dash, running 9.98 seconds, slightly wind assisted. He'd actually win the Florida Relays in that event, because that's the same thing he did in reality. But he'd also shock the world, winning the SEC championship by 0.02 of a second over Godson Ogunbrume of LSU. And if you really want to know how I know, I used the win gauge calculator. But like I said, you probably don't care about all that. And I probably don't have to say it, but I'm gonna say it anyway. He would win the SEC 200. So Florida would go 1-2 in that event once again. And he'd likely replace Ryan Willie in the 4x1 because he's a 400-meter runner. So Florida would edge out LSU there as well to become the SEC 4x1 champions. That means the Florida Gators would jump all the way from 6th place in reality to 2nd place with Erriyon Knighton on the team, still losing to the Arkansas Razorbacks once again. However, the NCAA Outdoor Championship meet is the biggest meet of the year, and Erriyon Knighton would pull out all the stops for that one. In the 100-meter dash prelims, the race would be so close for him to make the final, it would go down to the 1,000th of a second between him and Udodi Onwuzurike of Stanford. And assuming that it's him who gets into the final, he'd likely finish no higher than 7th. But you already know what happens next, because the 200-meter dash outdoors is Erriyon Knighton's race, and he would win it at the NCAA championship meet by more than 1/10 of a second over Udodi Onwuzurike of Stanford once again. He'd likely take out the collegiate record at some point in that season, but the 4x1 would likely come back down to Florida versus LSU, considering that the Gators only lost by 0.2 of a second at the NCAA meet. With a 400 runner on the team, I'm giving it to Florida, with Erriyon taking his place, giving them the national title in the relay. That means what used to be a near victory over Arkansas at the NCAA championships would no longer be a meet that was really in question. The Gators would be the national champions, by more than 10 points, and a freshman sprinter from Tampa, Florida would have made all the difference in that one. I totally understand that Erriyon Knighton skipped college, and things appear to be working out just fine for him. He's an Olympian and a world championship medalist, but he still could have done all of that competing in a college uniform. He likely wouldn't have a lot of competition in the NCAA that could beat him, but he'd be chasing the record books anyway. And to do that both indoors and outdoors is a lot harder than most people give it credit for. He turned pro at 16 years old and never looked back, and I don't blame him for it. But if he had simply allowed his professional coach to become his college coach first, he could have made a great run to become the greatest collegiate sprinter of all time. A journey that we'd all still be watching right now. I'm Coach Rob, and thank you so much for watching this video. And if you want to see more content like this, then please like and subscribe.